Gary Zacharias here, and you're listening to the Apologist Bookshelf. There's a book called The Compact Guide to World Religions, and it's excellent, and I've gotten a lot out of it. I've used it for some of my talks at church regarding different religious groups. And as far as podcasts go, I did Buddhism out of this book. I'd like to do the New Age movement. It's kind of interesting. It's almost like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall, as they say, because it's really hard to get clear numbers and clear definitions of a lot of things. They said the author here is Dean Halverson. At least he's the general editor. And in this article about the New Age movement, it's Dean Halverson and William Hansberger. They said it's really hard to figure out how many adherents there are to the New Age movement. As they said, it's a set of beliefs. It's not really an organization. You're not going to find a headquarters. You're not going to find an official document coming out of them and all that. So it's pretty fuzzy. They said there are indicators, though. They had a poll some time ago. CNN did it. Estimated 35% of all Americans believed in reincarnation. Wow, well, that's a central tenet of the New Age movement. Then they said they think the percentage of New Age adherents in Europe and South America is even higher than in the U.S. So what is this thing about New Age? Where did they get the idea of New Age? Well, what they're talking about is what the authors say is the coming Aquarian age. It's going to be replacing the old Pisces age. So every 2,000 years, according to astrologers, you get a new age. So the New Agers say this will be a time of utopia when the Aquarian age comes. They said the movement, when it talks about a New Age movement, said it's a smorgasbord. You know what that is, where you can buy different kinds of foods laid out in front of you. You get to choose. So it's a pick and choose kind of thing. From all sorts of groups and teachers and practices, you choose the path or the door according to whatever suits your taste and spirituality. So if you're a New Age person, you might be a Hindu, might be a Buddhist, a witch, Wiccan, maybe an astrologer, you're a channeler, you're a parapsychologist, and you might be interested in deep ecology, animal rights, holistic healing, maybe UFOs. So the surface belief really isn't that important. So there's a unifying philosophy underneath that really binds all the groups together. So the next section they give here is a history of and the roots of the New Age movement. It's been around a long time. It got its name from astrology. Remember, we just talked about that, the time of utopia that's going to come this next 2,000 years. So its basic beliefs, though, come from Hinduism and Buddhism. And they came to the U.S. from different swamis and yogis, and they're passed through also some people that I recognize because I've spent a lot of time as a teacher of English, reading and having my classes read some pretty famous American writers in the 19th century, Whitman and Thoreau and Emerson. And then they have channeling, which is contacting the spirits, which came through Fox sisters in the 1840s. They heard rappings that they claimed were coming from a dead person. And then you had ascended masters, teachings of the ascended masters, and all sorts of different people like Edgar Cayce, he was called the Sleeping Prophet. And the New Age movement also talked about the power of the mind when it regards with healing, when it came to healing, thanks to Phineas Quimby. He started the Mind Science group, like Christian Science, that's Mary Baker Eddy, the Unity School of Christianity, that's the Fillmores, and the Church of Religious Science, a man named Holmes. Now, it's also got a concern for ecology. Where'd that come from? Well, Native Americans, and then a very well-known book that came out in the 1960s. That's The Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. So you've got all these movements, but it's also got contemporary trends. For example, in medicine, you got holistic health. You got therapeutic touch. You got a man named Deepak Chopra. You've probably heard of him. In education, they've had values clarification, guided imagery. We see it in politics, globalism, planetary citizens, everybody coming together. In music, a man named Yanni, Yanni. In science, there's a book called The Tao of Physics. It's in psychology, transpersonal psychology. It's in ecology, the Green Movement. It's in business. There was Anthony Robbins and transformation technologies. And then in religion, there's Marianne Williamson and others. So it's gone from Shirley MacLaine back in the, 80s or so. And she's disassociated herself from that term, New Age, but she hasn't gotten rid of those New Age beliefs. So she's been around some. Well, what's rising right now in New Age is Wicca, religion of witchcraft. It's closely related to goddess worship and neo-paganism. They hold to, the people who buy into this Wicca hold to the divinity of nature, and that you'll gain spiritual power if you can manipulate natural forces. And it's become an attraction for younger people. Why? Well, think about that. If you're young, you don't feel like you're very powerful, and you don't feel like enough is being done for you. And it promises, Wicca promises power and mystery and self-gratification and rebellion, especially against Christianity. Another recent development they point out is New Age thought hooking up with the UFO movement. I mean, many channelers are saying they're not just channeling spirits, but they're channeling aliens from other galaxies and other dimensions. That's interesting. So let's get around to the core beliefs of the New Age movement, according to these two authors. So they have, let's see, how many? 5, 6, 7. They have 7. Okay, so we'll take a look at 7 beliefs, the core beliefs. Number 1, what's our problem? Right? That's a worldview question, isn't it? What's the human race? Where do we come from? What's our problem? How do we fix the problem? So, question, what's the problem? Perception. So we're ignorant. We've forgotten our true nature. We've forgotten that we are connected to and we've come from God. That's the universal mind. So we're in grave danger, this world of ours. We're too bent on rationality and linear thinking and Western thinking. It brought us science, yes, but it's taken us to the brink of extinction through environmental disasters and disharmony in our society. And we've got to search for spirituality, right? We've lost the sense of the sacred, they would say. And you're not going to find the sacred in the religions of the West, right? It's only in alternative religions. Now, that's religions of the East. So we need a new consciousness, according to them, right? So it's our perception, a new awareness, a paradigm shift, right? It's a power within that we can transform ourselves. So that's number 1, the problem of perception. Number 2, they have a view of God. So the central truth is that everything is divine. Everything flows from the divine oneness that is the essential reality beneath all things. All right, so they don't buy into the Judeo-Christian concept of God being a personal, holy being who is separate from all things. No, they believe in monism and pantheism. So what is that? Well, monism is the belief that God is one in the sense of being a oneness without duality. There's no separation within God. So the oneness is a force. It's an energy. Right? So that's important. That's all there is. The ultimate reality is not a lifeless energy. It's a cosmic mind. It's sometimes called the universal self. And so what you want to do if you're a New Ager is practice some way to get in touch with that force or that mind. And it could be through meditation, but through a lot of different ways. Now, they're also considered to be pantheists. And that's the belief that God is all and all is divine. Everything is coming out of this divine oneness. So that's their view of God. How about their view of humanity? Well, start again with that idea of God. If God is a life force or a vital energy, then we, since we've come from God, we're unconditionally connected to it. So we're part of that universal self, right? It's like individual streams that flow from an infinite lake. So our essence is being at one with God. Now, Christianity, of course, says, no, our problem is that we've rebelled against God and we've separated, we've broken our relationship. The New Age people, on the other hand, say, no, we can't sever the connection between us and the divine oneness. We're just ignorant. We're not rebels. We're ignorant. We've forgotten who we are. We're part of that universal self. And so things like yoga and meditation and other mind-expanding techniques is a way for us to experience this oneness. So that's their view of humanity. Number 4, the power of the mind. So the New Age movement says, well, the basic stuff of the universe is mind. So our minds can exert a tremendous power over reality. So we can believe positive thoughts manifest themselves in physical health. We can dream and then create reality as a result of it. We can bring into reality something that we want. That's, by the way, the story of Rhonda Byrne's book, The Secret. So anyway, so power of the mind, right? We can make things happen physically. Number 5, the immediate goal. Well, some New Agers say our goal is the perfection of our ability to love, right? And then we got to go on to the next stage. That's reincarnation. So we learn lessons and we move on. Other New Agers come from a perspective that is based on karma, which is a moral law of cause and effect, which says basically you reap what you sow. And so the goal of enlightenment is to release ourselves from attachment to all action, whether it's good or bad. And when we experience such a release, we will finally escape the cycles of being reincarnated lifetime after lifetime. We've got to escape that. That's the goal. So the New Ager has a slightly different slant on the concept of reincarnation from that of a Hindu. So for the New Ager, reincarnation is a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance. They really like that. They see it as a form of justice, and it escapes the idea for them. They want to get away from the Christian doctrine of a God who judges a person after one lifetime. So reincarnation for them sounds like good news. It's a spiritual evolution, right? It's like we're spiraling up and up and up as we go through these different lifetimes. Now, for the Hindu, reincarnation is not good news. It's to be escaped. You don't want to think you're going to go from lifetime to lifetime seeking perfection. It's suffering. Life after life you're the wheel of life, and you're going to suffer every time. You want to get past that. Here's number 6, another point. They said a call for assistance. So the New Agers encourage people to get in touch with spirit guides who can help them as they spiritually evolve and they transform. So they would be, sometimes they're called ascended masters, disembodied spirits who had physical bodies at one time, could be UFO aliens, might be the spirits of animals, could be angels. So we fill the void that's between us and this ultimate reality with spirit beings who can be channeled and will guide us along the path. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that really, really scary, because if you get in touch with something, I think you really are getting in touch with something, but it's not a disembodied spirit that's trying to help you ascend and trying to help you evolve. I think it's something that's out there to destroy you, coming from the devil's kingdom. But anyway, so that's their point number 6. Here's number 7, the ultimate goal. Well, it's oneness, right? The ultimate goal is for each person to relinquish all attachment and identification with your ego and become merged into the universal self. So that's eventually what's going to happen to all of us. We merge. It's kind of like the idea of the river again. This time we're all different rivers and we flow into this big lake. So we become part of the universal mind. Well, let's go to, let's see here. How much more do we have to the chapter? Yeah. You know what? I'm going to do just part. This is probably going to be a 2-part podcast. This next section is called Common New Age Arguments and Objections. All right, so here's, in other words, what does a New Ager say to a Christian or about a Christian, and how can we get back to that, come back to that somehow? So number 1, common New Age argument. Christians are so judgmental. I want to be a part of something that's loving and tolerant to all. Well, do you see the objection there? Let me just read that one more time. Christians are so judgmental. I want to be part of something that's loving and tolerant. Do you hear that? Christians are so judgmental. So who's doing the judging there? The New Ager. Yeah, they're being judgmental. So that's inconsistent. Now, they'll say, yes, but Jesus told us not to judge, Matthew 7. But if you keep reading, you look at John 7:24, stop judging by mere appearances and make a right judgment. I mean, Jesus judged a lot. He judged the Pharisees and the Sadducees and others all the time, but it was a right judgment. It wasn't a hypocritical judgment. It says you can also ask the New Ager, what do you mean by loving and tolerant? I want to be part of something that's loving and tolerant, right? Says that you can use an illustration. You're standing on the shore of a river, and you notice that some rafters are going to take the wrong fork, and maybe they're going to head toward a 50-foot fall, but you could warn them. Now, would it be loving and tolerant of you just to let them continue and wave to them because they've told you the river is not dangerous and all paths in the river lead to the same place? No. Now, New Agers don't like that analogy, but we think as Christians, we do think there's destruction ahead if we're going off on a wrong view. So we're loving and tolerant ourselves to try to help other people. Number 2, here's another issue they may bring up. Well, the book of Genesis teaches that humanity is separate from and above nature. Right? That's not good. Christian beliefs are responsible for people exploiting the resources of the planet. They've caused harm to the environment. He says, well, there are people who've definitely misinterpreted the Bible to exploit the environment. No doubt about that. But look what God says that we're supposed to do in Genesis 1. We're commanded to rule and subdue the earth. We're supposed to be shepherds of the environment. We're supposed to watch over it, right? We're supposed to bring order out of chaos in nature. The Bible's clear, too, that God will judge people who mishandle his creation. Here's what God says in Leviticus 18 to the children of Israel. And if you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. So God values his creation. Yes, he does. It's in his plan of salvation. He's provided a salvation plan that will not only liberate humanity, but it'll liberate the earth from bondage to decay. Look at Romans 8:21. So God wants to save the earth as well as save us. The two authors also say, if you're going to claim that Christianity is responsible for exploitation of the environment, that's an oversimplification. Our culture is not the result of just Christian principles, right? We've actually taken more from secular humanism and the Enlightenment and evolution and consumerism and urbanization, and so we've ruined the environment based on other things. So it should be pointed out, too, that cultures that don't have Christian worldviews, like the Marxist Soviet Union and the Hinduism of India, they actually have very bad environmental records. They're far worse than those nations based on a Christian worldview. They point out also, as Christians, we would agree with these New Agers that, yes, separation is a problem. But how is separation defined? Well, the New Ager says separation is that we see ourselves separate from the divine force within all things. No, that's not what the Christian sees. The Christian defines separation in the sense that we've rebelled against our Creator. And as a result of that, we've refused to be accountable to the one who made and cared for creation. Here's a third challenge that may come to the Christian from a New Ager. Christians believe God will send people to hell because of their bad deeds. How can people believe that a God of love would punish anyone by sending him or her to hell? Reincarnation seems so much more just. Well, as these two authors say, first, we've condemned ourselves. We're the ones responsible for separating ourselves from him. We're the rebels. It's like the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15. The son separated himself from the father. He's the one who left. The father didn't kick the son out. The son left of his own free will. And so these authors say in the same way, we're the ones who have alienated ourselves from God. We're enemies in our own minds against God because of our evil behavior. That's Colossians 1:21. So they say also that the father longed to be in relationship with his son in that story about the prodigal son. God reaches out to us in love, too, even though we're rebels and we're still rebelling against him. You can see that in Romans 5:8 and 1 John 4:9 and 10. And secondly, they say in reaction to that challenge, the Christian position is actually realistic. It acknowledges the consequences of sin. Sin's not abstract. It's lying, and it's cheating, and it's stealing, and it's slandering. And whether it's subtle or not, those actions carry consequences. That breaks relationships that we have with each other. And they go on to say that the biblical teaching on sin is realistic. It acknowledges how we are hurt not only when someone sins against us directly, but indirectly. So somebody may sin against a person we love. So if a teacher, for example, treats your child unfairly, you're upset. So in the same way, God loves all people. He's offended when we hurt each other. And then a third point, New Agers are saying a God of love wouldn't condemn people to hell. But they said, consider this, the option that everyone has the right to be ushered into God's presence. If there's no hell, how about this then? If that's true, if God allows everybody into his kingdom, then Hitler and Stalin and Pol Pot and Jeffrey Dahmer are going to be allowed into his kingdom. Would that be heaven or would that be hell? Or how about this? If God allows everybody to come into his kingdom the way they are morally, it means he's condoned their actions. He's patted them on the back. That sounds like a flaw in God's character. Why would you want to associate with a God that would turn his back on crimes like that? If God is absolutely holy, here's the third point. If God is absolutely holy, and yet everybody's ushered in his presence without changing morally, might it not be a greater punishment for sinners to be in the presence of an absolutely holy God than what hell would be? See, I've heard that before from people like Christopher Hitchens. They don't want to be around God. They don't like God. Hitchens called God North Korean dictator. So if you force people and tell them you're going to be in my presence, that might be excruciating for them. Here's a fourth thing about God wouldn't condemn people to hell. If God allows everybody into his kingdom, but only after he's changed them to make them loving, whether or not they wanted to be changed, hasn't he taken away their free will and turned them into robots? Yeah, exactly. Well, that gives you at least an idea. I still have several things to do. And in this chapter, it's a great chapter. I hope it gave you a lot of things to think about. And we'll do the second half. Maybe we'll do that in the next podcast because this is good stuff to chew on. Well, thank you for being part of the podcast today. Take care.